no matter how much AI advances, people still buy from people.
You got to look inside and figure out, what do you want people to feel when they're eventually deeming that you are a brand?
Everyone's using it, and most of it's horrible.
Welcome to the Growth by Creativity podcast, where we discuss the art of captivating storytelling, compelling design, and imaginative communication strategies through interviews and case studies with creative experts. Hope you enjoy and subscribe.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for being here tonight. I know many of you have even flown in, so this is incredible. Today, we're here to celebrate 10 years of GDS, believe it or not. But we wouldn't be here today if it weren't for all of you in this room. Our incredible clients, our team, our vendors, our partners, our friends and family. And for that, I just want to say a heartfelt thank you. But tonight is not just about looking back, it's about looking forward. With everything happening with AI, marketing becoming incredibly robotic, where do we go? So that's why I'm incredibly excited for tonight's panel, where we bring 3 different perspectives from a go-to-market standpoint, brand voice, and design. So with no further ado, I'd love to introduce Anthony Wood, founder of House of GenAI, a creative hub that upskills professional designers to boost their creativity with AI. Formerly, he was the CEO of the Shillington School of Graphic Design and ex-senior designer at top global agencies such as Havas and Augury. Angela Santillo, senior manager of corporate communications at Augury, a leader in manufacturing tech. Former brand voice consultant with a theater background, and her plays have been produced in NYC, San Francisco, and Chicago. And last but not least, we have David LaCombe, fractional CMO and go-to-market strategist, helping early and scaling companies sharpen their marketing. Former healthcare executive, now writing his new book, Marketing to a T. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so just to kick things off, where do you see marketing going in the next 5 to 10 years? And what are you most excited about?
I think that we're in a hype cycle with AI, that people are both incredibly enthusiastic, a little bit cautious, and there's going to come a point where we're going to see the new norm, right? Wherever that is. And a part of it is going to be a nostalgic look back of like, where's the human aspect of this? And so how do we take our technical acumen with AI to be able to get things done and still make people feel on the receiving end that there's a person behind this, even though it may not be necessarily, a person as you think. So if you boil it down, it's going to be like, how do we uniquely create interpersonal experiences in a world where everything feels so technical?
I think the next few years are going to see the marketing world putting out a lot of very generic AI content that is a shortcut to greater profits at the expense of all of us. And I think very quickly that's going to turn into the consumer not relating to it at all. And where I see the real excitement and potential of AI in a marketing sphere is that rather than producing one campaign that is supposed to relate to a broad audience, that by using AI with humans, that you can truly understand the different segments of a market and develop targeted and unique content to those groups with different creative, with different messaging, and different journeys that relate to all of the data and knowledge that is going to be like more readily available and uncomfortable slop for a little while.
Yes to all of that. And you captured something that was really kind of unique, is that a lot of times market research feels static. We've got the persona, we've got the corporation that we're studying, or we've got a market. And these things are not static by any means. They're dynamic, and they're rapidly being influenced by headwinds and crosswinds and tailwinds. So I think AI is going to enable us to take the fundamental things that we know about a market or our target customers and look at it from lots of different dimensions that would have kind of given us an ice cream headache if we had to do it by ourselves. But when you can harness technology, you can think in different ways that we've not had available to us before. So I think we've got to get past the blandosphere that's happening with AI generated content and really start challenging ourselves to unlocking user experiences that previously were just either unavailable to us because of budgets or we didn't have the creativity.
Yeah, I just want to double down on this theme of like personalization and education about audiences. Yeah, I agree. We have to get through the slog. So I'm trying to be optimistic about the future of marketing. But I think if you look at just storytelling in general, we have these trends that have been growing about extremely personal and extremely elevated. When you think about the kind of shows people really love to watch, they're usually very complex storytelling. So if we were to build on that momentum, the ability to tell more powerful, interesting, directed stories at folks that can make them feel seen, included, moved by a brand, I think will be really exciting, because Nike and Apple, they're really brands that can move us. And I think that's a potential that a lot of marketing departments can have with the ability for AI to help ideation and make other tasks easier. But I think there's a big unknown about how much the human will be taken out while people learn. And that's my concern coming up. But the potential to continue this storytelling trend, I think, is really powerful for the future of marketing of all companies.
And on that note, how do you think brands can move people?
Knowing them and being specific. There's this whole idea that like if you talk to one specifically, you can talk to all. So really imagining the person who you're reaching and talking on their level in a way that they can understand, that you feel that you know their worries, their concerns, how this can make their life better, and have an element of surprise in there, because I think we love with storytelling the unexpected, and so include that creativity. I think you'll catch someone.
In terms of how you're using AI in your day-to-day, what are you discovering as you're playing around with it every day?
I just wanted to latch on to what you were saying before about the strategy and research. So I'm currently running a AI branding masterclass, and I gave my students a brief to choose a client, a new product, and they had to do all of the competitor research and try and find an emotional white space in the market to pitch their design into. They all had different briefs, but they were able to go and find competitors, use AI to troll, tens of thousands of Google reviews, Reddit forums, and bring all of that data in and not create that picture of the user persona, which was, kind of horrible generalization of who you're talking to that was difficult to find the nuggets that people would actually relate to and, create something that was interesting. But what this was able to do is find, well, what are people complaining about? Everyone's doing this. Why don't we do this? And you can actually create something in that space that doesn't exist. And, then seeing how that relates to what they're outputting from a design and outcome perspective is like super meaningful. They're not copying the work of the competitors because they're able to channel in and go, this is the bit that I want. And I think that's, super exciting to be able to do, even, at this stage as a theoretical kind of experiment. Doing that on a level of like, we're communicating with tradesmen who are buying bolts and nails, as part of their day-to-day. They don't care about the technical specifications of it so much. Like, they do care if they break, but how are you going to sell that to them? So you need to find out, like, what are their day-to-day challenges outside of the nail itself that they can relate to and see. And AI can kind of help you do that. I don't know anything about tradespeople, but it allows you to be able to do that as a designer or marketer.
I agree with you. Like if you were to think traditionally as a marketer, you'd be like, tradesmen eat this cereal and they drive this car and they're 38 years old and they've got 2 years of military service. And you think like every person is like that. And it reminds me of like when I started wading into Reddit for my book research and I wanted to study what young marketers, Gen Z marketers would ask. What were they concerned about? And there was no one stereotype. Like if you were to look up and Google Gen Z behavior, it's going to give you like a list of stuff. But it's a whole other thing to be able to use technology to go into where they live. And at the time, a lot of it was Reddit, and just see the types of questions that they ask. And it was really eye-opening. And it changed my opinion on lots of different things. So I think that, we now have access to more information than we've ever had before. We need a partner, right, who helps us to sift through it all.
Which lends to my next question. How are you using AI in your day-to-day? For example, you, David, how are you using AI to help you with that research and staying up to date? Because like you said, it's not a one and done deal, right? You have to keep up with it. Is there a way you could automate and get sort of notifications, so to speak?
I think we're all like that curious kid on Christmas morning, right? Like figuring out what this thing does. And then you're like, I should probably do something practical with this that's worth my, my hourly rate. And that kind of feels cool. And then you start figuring out like, how can you get this thing to be doing things for you when you're not in the room?
Yeah.
And I think that's the progression that anybody who leads a business function, who has people reporting up to them, and they're trying to be able to demonstrate that AI actually has a place in your organization. It's like, how can we take people, replace mundane things that are in their life with AI as a partner, and then have the people go back and work on higher order things that require judgment and perspective and so on and so forth. So for me, it's been the research, and I'm afraid that I'm going to publish a book that will be relevant for a year and then it's not, right? So I'm going to build a community with it too, and then it needs to be going out there and finding out the next thing. And the other way that I use it is I've established a board of AI agents who I've fed not personas, but communication from people who I admire and respect at all different levels. And I've asked them now to guide me on decisions that I make, right? Looking for blind spots. How do I articulate more clearly? What's something that I'm not aware of that's of concern to people? And I really feel like when I convene my board several times a week, I'm way better off than if it was just me trying to figure this out and Googling something,
So, we've been using projects for email generators, trying to experiment so everyone stays on our messaging and our voice, but finding the voice of the customer, you have things like Gong. Like our salespeople are talking to customers all the time and you can't go through all the Gong calls, and we don't have like a direct channel to sales because they're also really busy. So I've been building agents to go through sales calls for top of mind issues on a monthly basis. I will double down on that and look for, starting to play with weird prompts to get quotes from them, because I want the voice of the customer, because we do happen to work with like blue collar tradespeople. So the way they talk about things is so engaging and like really fun. And we want to be able to take that and like use it as part of our voice and how we decide to strategize content. Like if they are talking about worry of spend with economic fears right now, I want to double down on the content I'm making about why spend. I'm letting it guide our strategy and coming straight from the customer. So I'm not just relying on like Google searches of industry news or McKinsey or all the trade pubs. I'm going to the customer. So agents, I don't have a whole flock of them yet, but I'm trying to build our community of agents.
No, I love that.
Our content.
Just in a few more months, you're gonna be so much farther than you are today.
Yeah.
And you'll look at the agents in a way that you can't even imagine now.
Yeah, I can make that workflow work right when you're like putting in the systems and the keywords, and then I'll be
What
building.
am I using to do that, Angela?
Our company is using Glean, but there's many of those business platforms that are bringing in the data from all the business, basically the tech stack of the business. And so as long as that tech stack is open or those files are open, that program will get the information as long as I direct it to it. So I have to be very specific in creating a prompt. And it looks like, I don't know, in theater, we used to make these really complicated chains of action for media to go on screen. And it's kind of like that. You have to build the little, sequences and directionals and stuff. Yeah.
Anthony, how are you using it day to day?
I mean, I first started experimenting in a visual sense with AI in 2017. And I was at the design school and I was giving a presentation on the future of design. So I was getting into the nitty gritty of like, where's this going to go? And so in the early stages of looking at the visual outcomes, they were pretty horrendous. Even 18 months ago, they were still terrible. But even back then I was seeing like, this has got legs. This has got something that is going to be really exciting and a potential threat. And I think the thing that I didn't anticipate back then was all of the other stages of the design process and running a business that it could be super useful for. So rather than thinking about it replacing the cool creative thing that I do, it's given me the capabilities to, have a basic knowledge of lots of different areas and use it as the expert advising me on doing something that is far superior than what I could create just solely on my own. So as starting this company, I am on my own, I'm bootstrapped. I would say 3 years ago, I'm writing the curriculum, I'm doing the marketing, I'm building the website, I'm doing the core things of like design. I have exposure to business and education, but one person can't do everything and go to market in a time frame that's going to allow me to continue to eat and travel and do all the things I want to do. And yeah, AI has allowed me to do that. Like, I think it's part of pretty much everything that I do. And really specifically, I get to have fun and create the aspirational visual stuff, which is like, doesn't have to be like targeted to a client. So
I like to just to the fun zone, right?
yeah,
There's a dopamine hit that I experience, like when you imagine something over a cup of coffee and you put it in there and you're like, I wasn't expecting to see that. And you're like, I didn't think today was going to be a creative day. And you're like, oh, wait a minute, I've got an appointment. And you're like, oh, okay, I got to keep that. But I want to get back to this thing that I wasn't even thinking about. So to me, it feels like, if you could have a perfect world, you would surround yourself with people who are smarter than you, creative, world-traveled, well-read, culturally diverse. And yeah, that you could have that, I guess. It's not easy to make those friends just like, when on demand. So to be able to kind of court these people and ask them to, to come into your world and in that moment is a lot of fun. And I hope that, business is always a business. And, if the business is not viable, then it's all for naught. But I think that leaders ought to be also figuring out how do we make work fun a little bit, because we've gone through a really very difficult few years right before the pandemic and then during and after. And for a lot of people, work is not fun right now.
In the creative fields, there's, I would say, the majority of designers and creatives and creative directors out there that are just putting up this blanket barrier that AI stole the work, it's going to replace us, and it's not of value. But the thing that when I'm talking about having fun and creating things, when you are wanting to create, if you've only ever used colored pencils and graphite, and all of a sudden you can build a 3D model, made to look out of clay, and you can visualize that idea in your head super quick just to get it out there and go, that was like super fun and creative. And like, maybe if we wanted to take this further, we will then work with the creative professional that could actually create that. But as an individual, it's exposing me and allowing me to explore all of these different areas that were beyond my technical capabilities of creative.
Visualize what's in your head. It makes it tangible, and then you can take that and take it further, right?
Or say, no, I hate it.
Yeah, that's
without like, going through all of the trauma of actually making it and then trying to make it work. You can test and iterate quickly with things that normally would have taken months of like going from the drawing stage through to the final production, and you're not really knowing what it's going to look like until the very end.
And so bringing all of this back to content creation, which is probably what we do here most of the time, we spoke about authenticity at the beginning of this fireside chat. What do brands need to do to be authentic other than know your ICP, do the research, keep up to date with the research? Do you have any tactical tips for some of our other clients that they can implement?
Keep people involved.
Okay, can you expand on that?
Yeah, a colleague of mine, especially in the B2B space, he was like, no matter how much AI advances, people still buy from people. You're not going to get rid of that impetus to finally make a deal or put your money somewhere. So, like using your subject matter experts in the company, using your customers, showing actual faces of people. I think already, I hear a lot of like just the AI generated images, especially like on Instagram. It's happening like social media, not as much on LinkedIn, but it's there. But having an actual person just sitting there talking, maybe with some fun elements, but keep the people part of the conversation. I think it just doubles down on what you're talking about. You're willing to stand behind what you're doing by showing an actual human, and it maintains that element of we are just looking to connect with each other and keep that going, especially in a B2B space.
Yeah, and something I learned from you, Angela, is a lot of the work we do, actually, you want the raw footage, the video taken from the phone. It's not like high production. I thought that was a really interesting take.
Well, and that's also based on your audience. Like we know, with tradespeople, they don't like high production. They're suspicious of it. That makes us feel like we're just fancy people coming in that's going to sell them magic in a box. So, we had this kind of debate. We had someone go into a factory, show our new technology while the factory was sounding behind them. All you can hear is the factory, and you hear this guy just yelling into his laws.
All of these machines are really noisy.
And someone's like, we got to dub them. I was like, keep it. We're putting in subtitles because it shows we know your factory. We have been there. We know what it smells like. We know what you need. And welcome to our product. I hope you enjoy the karaoke style subtitles. Like, congratulations. This is a great product. Yeah, so it depends on your audience. Now, some audiences won't want that. They might want something a little more glossy. And I think definitely beauty brands, you see all this, trend of people super zoomed up doing their makeup while talking about their day. Like that's the influencer way for beauty and skincare, that you feel like somehow you're getting ready together and it's super impersonal. Their tech is a big ring light, but you have to just know your audience and, I don't know, not get totally into the trends, but, know what's working.
David, what are you doing to keep content authentic?
So a lot of the companies that I work with are very early stage, and they start off with this product-led mentality. They don't have a brand yet, right? A logo is not a brand, as I'm sure you would, coach us all. And so sometimes we have to find ways to, while we're shortening the time for them to find their first few clients, is ask them to reflect on what's the brand experience that they want. Like, are they bringing part of their personality into this, right? Were you moved by something? So for example, I'm working with a healthcare brand right now who had their parent had a negative healthcare experience, and it drove that person who was an entrepreneur and kind of a tech person into spooling up a business that he had no idea that he was going to spool up until his mom was kind of mistreated. And so I'm like, that doesn't show up in any of your literature, that doesn't show up in any of your social, that doesn't show up on your website, yet that drove you and continues to drive you to want to do this, this heroic thing, right? That's going to make a difference in people's lives. And there, he went probably the most difficult way to market. He's, taking on incumbents who've been in that space for 20 years, right? And, a little bit of incremental, development every year, a couple new features that keeps most of the clients happy. It's just boring, right? Customers aren't really happy with this at all. So he's going to have to bring something more than, we've got 5 more features than the other guys, right? To get the enterprise systems to move. So, the long answer to your short question is, I think that people, or founders or organizations, have to figure out what's their brand DNA. There's a strategist by the name of Andy Cunningham who worked for an agency that Steve Jobs had hired to help bring the Mac to market. And then after Steve left Apple, she went with him again. And Andy wrote, about positioning, and she says that brands actually have a DNA and they have personalities, right? So one could be like a mother, and one could be, like a technical, type of thing. You got to look inside and figure out, what do you want people to feel when they're eventually deeming that you are a brand, right? I can go to Caroline and her team because I know the experience is going to be like this.
Anthony, your thoughts?
Yeah, so if you think about the golden age of advertising and the Don Draper style creative director who has this insight and vision that they've just miraculously come up with, and they're going to dictate to the rest of the world about how they should feel about a moment or a memory or a product. And they went through like a very retail consumer product specifications and features and that kind of thing. Then we fast forward a bit more into the millennial design. And the millennial design was, companies for good. We're 100% organic and we're changing the world. And the design was minimal and beautiful and clean. And in New York's, you go for lunch around here and you'll see the brands that I'm talking about, the Sweet Greens, or they're talking about the brand itself having these values that were idealistic. The problem with it is that the companies don't live up to that. So when you have this mismatch between, or disparity between the things that you're saying and like living the truth of, do you actually have those ethical values in your company? Then the marketing, design, and branding, along with the company, have created this situation where there's a huge distrust in that type of design. And when we're talking about how we engage and think about it, is looking at like, how can you actually be authentic? So you might be selling a very boring product, but there's humor in every day, or there's like insights that you can get along the process that you actually relate to that person without making false claims or, selling the dream of the 1960s. So you kind of see this going along with brands that they're a bit messy. It's not just like talking in the face of the camera with a perfect makeup or whatever. It's kind of stupid, or it is just like pulling on something funny that people are laughing at to, and still sell their product, but they're looking at their market, what's going on and how they're perceiving it. And that's a very human thing.
So in a way, showing more vulnerability, perhaps, right?
Yeah, because it doesn't need to be polished. It's like that, the design itself might be a bit messy and ugly and, thrown on a page because they don't want to see that polished thing, because it's, you're not actually real, you're not doing it. And looking at different markets is like, well, are you selling features, or are you just selling like, I like that brand, like something a bit more authentic?
I like your point. I mean, there has been a dramatic acceleration in our ability to test messaging, right? I can go in and I'm going to go look for a new car, or I'm going to go look for, a suit or whatever. And you'll start off maybe on the website, or you're going to go and talk to your friend and say, hey, where did you get that jacket or whatever? And then you can immediately test that hypothesis or that statement that they're making about how your life is going to be better with real users. And you can see through the BS so far away and so quickly now that when we talk about authenticity, I think it's less about trying to create some mood and just owning up to, hey, this thing's got some warts on it, right? But here's why we exist. We're trying to make this thing better. And some of the things that we're doing is still unknown. We're actually exploring with our customers. So when we wake up in the morning, we're heading in that direction, but we don't know what's going to be coming, right? And so I think people would respect that more so than promising, this miraculous outcome that if you go with us, that you're going to get it. And right now, the threshold or the tolerance, right, for time to value is so short that, like you've got to be able to like break down your journey. Here's the destination, but here's the things you're going to see along the way. It's almost like a cruise. Yes, you're going to leave, the port, right, of Anchorage, but look at all these cool things you're going to see before we, really, return. And I think that helps people to realize that there is no just one and done experience. You have to let people know, like, this is going to be transformative in this way, and let them know it won't be easy, right? If that's the case for your particular brand.
Which is a great segue to my next question. What are the main roadblocks you're facing in marketing, and what roadblocks do you anticipate facing in the future?
From the content perspective, how fast AI is changing searchability, Google AI, Open AI, how to get your company to rank. There's clicks through websites are dropping because people are using AI overview as the thing to be. So now to think of SEO plus SEO related to overview, and it's still kind of a guessing game. It's like putting more questions now and have longer content that isn't AI generated, and yet your company says you should use AI to generate your blogs. And you're like, oh, I don't know what to do now. And FAQs everywhere. I'm like, we're going back to FAQs everywhere. Is this what's happening? So, and all the webinars and I think that's going to continue to confuse, because I think people are already seeing visits to their website is going down. But if your website is ready for that visitor who finds you on an AI search, trends are kind of showing they're more likely to maybe convert. So, and I think it's going to continue to change. I don't see that going, like my struggle to keep up with the AI movement in that capacity is really intense, and I don't think it's going to stop. Especially while you're like are trying to build your strategy and map it out with your creatives, and then you're like, stop what you're doing. Interview-based blogs only, no more creative writing. We need there to be questions. Like, stop, reverse. Like I'm just waiting to. So it's just hard when you're building out a strategy every quarter, or even just for the half year. I just imagine it's going to continue to be my brave new world. Because who knows?
I mean, I've been writing JSON prompts to put in a script on my blogs for the Q&As and FAQs so I can rank for A, and I don't know what the hell I'm doing, but
yeah,
they're there. And I think when you look at, there can be all of these buzz and confusion, and everyone's an expert on TikTok telling you, this is what you need to do for this is what you need to do, and no one knows. Like it's a work in progress, and you don't understand how these big companies and the models are working and understanding and being able to search. So all of these people that are telling you that they're experts, I don't think they are. But if it comes back to the core of like what makes good messaging is quality content, telling a good narrative and story through rich media. So photography, video.
Yeah, or writing on the page.
Yeah. You've got, too long didn't read at the top. You've got this stuff that actually makes it engaging and fun and interesting to consume that content is far more important than all of the...
Yeah, no, I think where it's getting weird is like when you start to see your web performance, it's like, what caused it? You're kind of like, I don't know what caused that this month, whereas before you could just look at your ranking plus all those other things like your campaigns, your this and that. So the thing I'm starting to look at now, for your point, is how long are they engaging on the website? I'm going to still track that as like my main metric, because if they're going on the website for a while, we did good with our message and they're going to do a form fill at some point.
So what are the biggest marketing roadblocks that you guys are facing right now? And what roadblocks do you anticipate in the future?
How AI is impacting SEO and how you feed into Google overviews and OpenAI sources or GenAI sources. It's really confusing how you should do it. There are all these recommendations on how you should optimize your content. We're seeing people not clicking through to websites as much because they're treating the overview as like their source of knowledge. And it's really confusing to develop your strategy with like what and then it's changing in real time. And how do you do that with limited sources, with your quarterly plans, your half year plans? And it's such just like an whole new world that I think it's going to continue to cause confusion in the years to come while people figure out what's the best way to do it. Because it's kind of like SEO, but I don't know, but the SEO has a behavior problem that you're trying to figure out with your therapist or something, like couples counseling with my SEO plans right now. Yeah, it's really hard to understand if I can stand behind my content when they are looking at website performance right now or SEO performance. I don't know if I'm doing well or not doing well or what I should do different.
David, what are you encountering and what do you anticipate encountering?
Yeah, the roadblocks, the headwinds that I'm experiencing with my clients is that if you were to think about where CEOs come from, it's engineering, it's finance, marketing is usually the lesser, right, percentage. And so these are individuals who've in their entire professional life have made calculated judgments and decisions in business based on predictable outcomes.
Yeah.
And markets and business has just changed so dramatically. Marketing investments are a sales enablement tool, right, in my mind. And there's this lagging time aspect to it, right? So like a creative work that you guys are going to do gets into motion next month at the end of the quarter, and we may not be able to detect its impact, right, on some type of business driver for 3 quarters.
Right.
So when you've got boards or investors or senior leaders who are looking for quarter over quarter performance, this is, I think, part of the reason why we're getting everyone's marketer and going to give us advice, or that we change the strategy because we think that the thing that we were doing last week wasn't actually working when really it just needed more time, right? And so when I was doing my research for my book, one of the things that came out is that, in fact, the very first interview, I almost quit the book project. This was a PhD serial tech entrepreneur who, when I asked his opinion of the marketing function, this stream of explicit language came out. He was so pissed. I'm trying to understand what was really just driving this guy's aggression and anger. And it was basically marketing investments spent without a sense of what it's going to really yield, right? And so it's burning through cash. So marketers and marketing leaders, or if you're in the creative agencies, are going to have to be able to show some causation, right? And when we talk about AI, I think most of us are thinking about generative AI, which is, ubiquitous in our life, right? But another form of AI is causal AI, which, generative AI is all looking backwards of things that we already know, right? I may not know them, but I could ask ChatGPT and it's going to find it for me. Causal AI is looking forward and imagine being able to have a what if machine and be able to say, what if I doubled down on this brand experience, right? What would that yield in a period of time? And we could actually, if you don't have data of your own, we can use synthetic data to begin with. And that puts us in a direction. And once you start getting your own data, we can replace the synthetic data with your own. And this is going to be a game changer. And the reason why this is so important, and I'm taking the time to explain this now, is that now there's case law examples where officers of companies are being held personally liable because they should have known better about decisions, and there's consequence to stakeholders or shareholders. So I think the pressure's only going to get harder, but rather than continue to guess, right, this is great creative, it's going to make an impact. Well, yes, it could be amazing creative, but it just wasn't what the market needed. We could probably embrace different types of AI to be able to predict what's going to actually double down. We think that there's probably at least a 30% waste in go-to-market spending just because we don't know and we're guessing. And if you could identify the 30%, and either return it to shareholders or, bring it back to, hey, we do know what's working. Let's double down there. This will be a differentiator.
And what softwares are there out there that can help you with causal AI?
So if you were to ask that question only 5 or 6 years ago, you would probably have invested tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions of a research department, right? Using big tech to be able to do, marketing modeling. Today, there are startups who've been doing this for a couple of years, way beyond the proof of concept. Proof Analytics is a group that I work with who could literally get you started, one-on-one, a consult with an analyst and a CEO and, maybe their VP of sales and a board member. We get to learn your company, and then we can start to actually model. And that's a transformative conversation of like, this doesn't seem to be actually doing anything, right? If nothing else, just stop, right? Allocate the money for something else.
If you guys had unlimited budget, what would you do?
Go on vacation?
I'll be indulgent in my answer, kind of. I mean, I attended a webinar, and I don't know the company, but they mentioned that they got brought on by this company that was making HR products, and they did research into their personas, and they realized that a big bulk of their customers loved murder shows. And so they created a narrative podcast that was about a murder show. It was a couple episodes, and I don't know how they threaded in the product, but I thought, oh, how cool to do a narrative fiction play that's inspired by what your audience likes and how to somehow not make it like over the head with your product. Like, I don't know if that's just the commercial placement that happened, but I thought, man, I'd love to do a narrative that's driven by what I know our audience likes,
It's really cool.
So, but then of course they talked about, well, we couldn't necessarily prove the ROI because it was brand awareness, and that's hard to track that touch. So it got scrapped for the second season, but I would want to do a narrative podcast based on what my customers like, and then I could create a whole story
Love that.
just about that.
David, what would you do?
I would carefully architect the combination of my tech stack. I would reduce technology that we're not using. Most of my clients find in the first few months as we start asking questions like, well, we don't even really use that. The last guy made us use it, right? So I would eliminate waste as a good gesture back to the board, like we're saving money. But then I would find ways to really deeply understand, the customer behavior, right? So like, I love the phrase go to Gemba, where you're actually going to go where the work is done. This was your example earlier, the warehouse and the sounds, it is dirty and gritty and it smells nothing clean or polished about the whole thing at all, right? And just go and, I would have my marketers actually work on the assembly line or something to that effect, or like they got to go do deliveries, or they got to be with somebody who's got to deliver bad news in healthcare. Like whatever the problem is that you solve, I think it's almost invalid and maybe even a little bit of malpractice, to be controversial, to say how your thing impacts people without having walked in that shoes. So if I had a lot of money, I would put our team of product people, marketers, salespeople actually in the environment. That gets me to the point where I can be truly empathetic, because like, I think people confuse the term empathy with sympathy. You've got a really hard job. That's not empathy. That's sympathy. You're just trying to connect with people emotionally. Empathy is where you're like, I've done your job, and I know by the time you get to this step, there's a risk of you getting hurt, or you're fatigued, or you wish you had this, tool. And now I'm up here, right? Even though I don't have your job title, but I've done your work.
Yeah.
And I think that goes a long way. What would I do with that information? I'd create experiences like what you're creating for us tonight. Like, we're not going to forget this, we were socializing before we started filming. We're having a conversation now, and then we're going to talk afterwards at dinner, and we'll get to know each other. Some of us are coming in here as strangers, and we're going to leave as connections. And if I could work with a brand that built connection and community, I'd really want to, do more with them, because I think the thing is, maybe you start working with them for this little tiny thing or whatever it is, and then you're like, these guys know me, they feel me, right? And like, we could work on these other problems. And it's much cheaper to do business with people who already know you and like you than go and find the next guy who are you, right? So I would use my money to really experience empathy from the customer standpoint, and then I would use that to create experiences. I would not go mass media marketing in today's day and age, because I don't think people trust it.
Yeah.
And you're so vulnerable. The second you put it out there, people are like judging you. You're like, that's BS. You don't really do that, right? So now you have to overcome this, facade you're trying to create, which was never really real, but you thought that it was real for somebody else. So
I love that.
that's what I do.
Anthony, what would you do?
This is a super hard question.
I know. I'm giving you a blank canvas.
So I think design has the ability to change hearts and minds and convince, compel, and even create communities. And I think if I had endless amounts of cash, I would like to bring together creatives from all different aspects of the world, not just like cool hipster creatives, or from across the world, to solve problems for the world. Of how can we use the tool of design and language and
Methodology.
to solve a real world design problem from lots of different perspectives.
I love that. Have you heard about hackathons?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm wondering, like, is there a design version of that?
Yeah.
Need to
That could be fun.
investigate.
but like the
Onto the street,
multidisciplinary
David.
Yeah,
artist kind of hackathon.
yeah, but like as the thing that distinguishes design from art is solving a problem.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be design thinking isn't necessarily what it looks like and how it sounds. It's solving a real world problem through thinking about it in a design process of research and understanding and
Deep knowledge of the user,
yes,
walking in the user's shoes. It's kind of all tying together.
it is, and that's what design is. It's not just the aesthetic.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'd love to do that. That's my
I'd love to work with you on that. I'll give you a clinical example. So this might shock and scare you a little bit, but women are far less likely to receive CPR if they were to collapse from a cardiac arrest than men in North America. And so when you look at survival rates for women who experience cardiac arrest in public, it's slightly less than men because people don't start CPR before the fire department or EMS or the police gets there. And it's all around stigma. Like, I don't know what to do, like this is awkward. And so they'll do nothing. When really just getting past that and doing compressions on this person, irrespective of their sex, could mean the difference of them going home to their family or not. And so I could imagine where working with design could help us to destigmify this, right? Across different, religions, across different ethnicities, different cultures, and that's kind of unusual for healthcare to partner with, designers to solve a clinical problem. Like they might go to scientists to think about this, who can bring the data, right? There's already a disparity, there's an inequity,
But not the empathy.
right? But not the empathy and the connection. We're like, I'm moved by this and I'm going to go take that CPR class, and damn it, if this happens to me, I'm going to get involved.
Yeah.
Thank you. Time for questions. No questions?
I had a question. Thank you. So Anthony, you mentioned that you would want to do like a design-a-thon. What do you think could be a practical problem that designers can solve?
just like basic understanding of different cultures, I think, is a good one. There's a lot of misunderstanding about, don't want to go into religions or anything, but the not understanding or having exposure to people from different thought processes, or an acceptance of someone can have their own opinions, but what is the goal of us being on this world, like, walking around every day, if we're not learning and understanding about other people's ways of thinking? And yeah, I don't know. I think there's a lot of, at the moment, there's a lot of building people up against other groups of people that is completely unjustified. And I think that's not only a communication problem to solve, it's systemic. How do we actually get people to like integrate and understand each other? That doesn't mean you have to live their way or do what they're doing, but enjoy and learn from people that are living and thinking in different ways. And I think that's a really exciting thing, not just surrounding yourself with everyone that's the same.
You got a really great perspective on that. While you were talking, it led me to think about my experience when our son is now 20, but when he was young, books, that was the greatest and most frequent experience I had with designers at that time, because every book was richly illustrated and it could take us to places all around the world. And we had so many books, like it was like, and we would voraciously read them at nighttime before we went to bed. And like designers made that possible. If it was just the text, it wouldn't have been the same rich experience. It made me think of it when you were talking.
Well, it makes me think like, I don't know, I'm always curious about how we've lost the ability to have hard conversations, and maybe we never had it, and would be curious for a design aspect. Like you can look at it linguistically and like how you should, be curious and like yes and everything and, that. But like, I don't know. I mean, I think that's going to be the peril of not understanding, is not being able to have hard conversations. I would be curious a design approach to that.
Yeah. Or like just even looking at the benefits and limitations of different ways of thinking. So, you've got a group of people that does this, and that means they get to explore and do all of this crazy stuff, and then they're missing out on other forms of connection or whatever. And just looking at things from that, from both sides, and understanding, what you can learn from different people.
Yeah. Any other questions? Do you ever feel like AI makes you feel like you're cheating, even though it's not cheating technically? Because I don't know, when you first start using it, you're a little bit, I'm into fashion design, for instance, and whenever we use AI for graphics or for clothing, you're a little bit afraid that somebody else out there asked the same question to AI, got the same, idea, and that it's not yours anymore, and that it's out there, and that it might be like a lawsuit problem if two people have the same thing. So does it happen to you with design, with text, with things like that?
For me, I like to use AI to show all the cliches so I can avoid taglines with those phrases. It's my big way of saying like, what is the market doing and how can I differentiate from the market? So that's one way I do it. I started to accept AI more because of just the sheer workload of it all. Because AI is here, everyone is expecting more output. So I used to feel really kind of shamed about it because I am someone who really like is all about quality and creative thinking and inquiry. And I'd still produce fast, but not as fast. So I've gotten more comfortable with what do you feel ethically cool with giving to AI to at least do like a first rough draft, and what don't you feel good with? I will say it's not quite what you asked, but there was a recent study from MIT that showed people who use GenAI versus not for thinking, they had a cognitive decline pretty quick. And it hasn't been vetted by peers, but I will say I am noticing I have no emotional attachment or really recall of things I use just AI for, or the projects I use majority of AI. So I'm starting to be very aware that like I can't really recall that project we did, and I have no feelings about it. So I'm starting to get precious about how I use it, so I can have. I am so sorry. So so I can have an emotional interaction as a creative, because then I'm just creating anemic work, and some of the work can be anemic, like an announcement bar, stuff like some emails, other work shouldn't. So I'm starting to get really precious about that. Not quite do I feel like I'm cheating, but maybe I'm cheating my emotional development as a human.
I think it also just depends where in the design process you're using it, right? Are you using it directly for output or for creative thinking? Are you using it, as we were talking about yesterday, as a creative collaborator, right? That's okay. That's part of the process, right? Are you copying and pasting? Well, I'm not a legal person, but yeah, you'd probably have to be careful. Yeah, so like a balance of everything, but it also takes thought into how you're using it. And so it's kind of like my questions, like, did you ever feel like it was cheating just because you're starting to use it in new ways, But what you answered was like pretty, is this working, Molly? Okay. Yeah, it's pretty on point what you said. Yeah.
I think one of the things that you're kind of touching upon is imposter syndrome. And the tool that you're using to create something isn't what's important about it. So if I'm transitioning from analog photography to digital photography, am I cheating because I didn't process the negatives in the darkroom and then take it into the process of dipping it in all of the different chemicals and it being wrong and having to go back and re-expose it? And am I cheating because I can just go into Photoshop and manipulate that? And I think a lot of people, when they're thinking about AI, is saying that it's cheating, but everyone's using it and most of it's horrible. So if you're actually being able to create something good with it, then you're doing something right. And just looking at that timeline of how people think and how creatives kind of have to operate. So when I was being trained as a designer, we would have 3-month projects at university, and I wouldn't show my friends my process work. And it's not finished. And then all of a sudden I'm putting something in front of the world that could have really benefited from other people giving them my ideas and talking and collaborating and doing. And if you're working with AI and looking at, you've got to put content out every day, for instance, it can't be that perfect thing. But what's important about it, is it that it's perfect and polished, or you're actually conveying a really great message that is engaging with the audience or whatever? It's not the perfect thing. And I think AI will become a component of that until it does actually get really good, and then who knows?
And just to bring back 2 points, I think like you mentioned like the graphite and the colored pencils, and those were the only tools. And then you talked about your like suite of agents that you're making for you. I think the thing to also look at is, this is a tool for you. So what kind of creative do you want to be, and what kind of tool can it be to create the work that you're proud of? And like and AI is customizable that way for you. Who knows what like your bosses will want, but as the creative who has to output it, you get to decide. You can build your agents, you can use your new graphic tool, and you can figure out how it makes you better.
So if you're a fashion designer, right? So a fashion designer doesn't necessarily design the print on the fabric.
She actually does do prints.
But they don't do this. They could be two different things. Like the fashion designer might engage an illustrator or an artist to actually work on the work that's going on the fabric that they're then going to make the clothing out of. And so when you're working with AI and trying to realize what's in your head and get it out there, you may still then go, okay, well, I'm going to go and find the artist that's perfect to do this component of it. And you bring the groups of people. And one of those things, and maybe many of them, can be the AI component, but also it's going to be part of a bigger process if we're talking about something that's refined and finished, that combines AI that gets your creative sold in faster, and you collaborating with amazing creators that push you further than you would do just on your own.
I want to just quickly build on what you just said. I invite you to ask yourself one question. Are you better at what you do today than a year ago because you've involved AI?
I guess for some projects, yes.
Yeah, you've grown.
Yeah.
Right? Hard to predict where it's going to go, but business is competitive. Like if you can find an advantage where you can unlock something in your own creative mind by engaging AI that wouldn't have come if it were you're just kind of in your routinized day. I look at it as like, I'm not looking to steal anybody's ideas, right? I'm just looking to clear my own head and think differently. Like I talk about mental fences, like where you just kind of think of the same way all the time. And what does that inhibit you? Where you're actually we're all engaging with AI and unlocking ways of thinking that we never would have. So I hope that, if we ask you the same question this time next year, you'd be like, I've grown so much in ways that were unexpected.
Did anyone in the workshop yesterday go home and use AI in the collaborative fashion that we discussed?
We got up too late.
Were you drinking?